At Kinglow Hades asks, how to make your 808 hit harder? So here's another one, another question that we get a lot. Basically, you know, when you use the word hitting or, you know, punch through a mix, cut through a mix, first thing that comes to my mind is transients. So transients, for those who don't know, are a little kind of attacky, spiky portion right at the beginning of a sound. So it's kind of like the percussive element, the leading edge of any sound. 808s generally don't have that. They're very bassy, subby sounds without a very pronounced, clear attack. Now, the waters get muddied when you think about like the 8 gajillion samples out there that are labeled 808. Some of them are layers of things already. So you might have something called an 808 that really does have a pronounced attack, but with an actual 808, you pretty much have to give it an attack. It's up to you to sort of either layer one in or try and shape one in some other way. If you're just after getting results, if you just want this to be easy and quick and painless, I would say go through you know, the multitude of 808 samples and just find one that already has all the features you're looking for. It has that punchy attack, has that deep sustain, everything's just kind of pre-packaged for you, and just use that. So that's easy, but you know, if you're anything like me, that's probably not that gratifying to just use someone else's work. So the first thing I would recommend is if you're literally trying to create an attack to this sound, layer samples. So find a sample that has that kind of attacky portion that you want. Have a sample that has like the punch, the low end weight and punch, and then that big subby sustain. It can be more than 2 samples. It can be 3, 4 things, and just layer them up. And you know, be careful when you're layering samples that they are phase coherent. So if you're putting 2 things together, look at the waveform and make sure that the peaks kind of line up and that the troughs kind of line up as much as possible. Listen to them, and if you hear, you know, if both sounds are pretty bassy on their own, but when you combine them, you start to lose the bass, that's a pretty clear sign that they're not adding together nicely. So the fix for that, first thing you could try is flipping the polarity on one of the channels and seeing if that brings some of the bass back in, or just going on the timeline and nudging it over a little bit to line things up. The other thing is if you've got like an attacky kick drum and you're layering it with kind of a more sustained thing, if you like the way that sounds, but there's something kind of fighting in the low frequencies, don't be afraid to kind of shape the sample to what you need it to be. So you can roll off the lows of that attacky element, because all you really need is the high frequencies for that punch and that transient to come through. And that might make it kind of layer much more, you know, play more nicely with the other samples. If you've got a sound that you're more or less happy with, but you're just trying to like add just a little bit more aggressiveness to the attack, or just a little bit more kind of a leading edge to the sound, where layering another sample might be a little too heavy-handed or change the sound in a way you don't like, there's definitely things you can do. Compression, sort of like a fast-ish attack, something that lets a little bit of the transient through and then kind of clamps down. So something in the order, you could try like 3 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds. Listen to how each one sort of changes the feel of the attack and the grab of the compressor. A little bit more overt is something called a Transient Designer. Those tools literally separate the attack and the sustain portion of a sound and let you balance between the two. I know Flux, I think, makes a free one. There's a couple of other free ones out there, and you know, they're sort of all over the place. But that can help you, you know, bring up the level of the attack, and maybe you take the sustain down a bit, and that can punch up the drums. Like transients by definition have high frequencies. They are high frequency components. If your 808 is lacking a little bit of that, just using some saturation. So some kind of distortion, because distortion literally adds harmonics to the sound, and different things will distort in different ways. So something that models tubes will distort in a way differently than something that models transformers, which distorts differently, something that models transistors or op-amp clipping or diode clipping or any of that kind of stuff. You don't have to get super into the nerd aspect of it. Just try different saturation plugins, different models, find one that works for you that can add a little bit of that bite to the attack. Even something like a hard clipper, which isn't always the most graceful sound, but sometimes it can add just that right amount of like a little burst of energy, a little burst of noise to that attack portion. Hey everyone, I'm Al Easler, Senior Audio Engineer here at LANDR. If you like this video or any of the other videos on this channel, consider liking and subscribing. If you need help with your mix, leave a question or comment below, and either myself or one of our other audio engineers will answer it. Thanks for watching.